Happy Wednesday, everyone, and welcome to Nuance Live, sponsored by me. It's just me for now. And I'm really happy to be here with you guys at the start of this journey. I decided I want to start this show because me making these short form videos is fun, but doing live streams where we really get into the nuances and perspectives to help you make sense of what's going on in the world and form your own opinion is, I think, the highest value I can actually provide to you right now. So every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, we're going to go deep on different hot headlines, and I'm going to do my best to give you the best arguments for and against the different sides of these various debates, as well as offer my opinion, because it's called nuanced, not neutral. So I want to give you my take and help you develop your own. And for anyone who is watching who is a subscriber on X, a subscriber on Instagram, or a YouTube member, I will also answer your questions live. So the way I like to structure this is I go through about 2 to 3 topics per broadcast. And then at the end of each of those topics, I'll take questions from my subscribers. And if you're a subscriber or a member on YouTube, make sure to submit your question in the private thread so that I can see your question and I don't miss it. Because I get a lot of comments when I'm doing these streams. It's really hard to track who's a subscriber versus who's not a subscriber. So getting into the private thread is the best way. But if I do see you pop up in the chat and I recognize your name because you're a subscriber, I'll try to get to you there as well. Okay, so let's talk about what we're going to talk about today. Pretty exciting last 48 hours. Yesterday, Trump released the JFK files. And even as I say that headline, there's some nuance into what the headline actually means, which I'll get into a second. That's the first thing that we're going to talk about. The second thing is vice presidential candidate Tim Walz from 2024 has been trending on X and in the media for some of his comments about Tesla and about masculinity. So we'll talk about that one second. Okay. First, Trump followed through on his campaign promise to release the JFK files yesterday, and it is a behemoth. Trump said it was 80,000 pages of material, and it's actually 63,000. And most of it is scans of physical documents, which makes it really hard to get through. So what does that mean for you? Well, that means that if there are new conclusions to be drawn from the new information that just got released, it'll take a while for the experts to get through it all because it's 63,000 pages, and you can't do that thing where you control F and just scan for CIA to see who killed JFK, right? So it'll actually take some time to get through, but it's still an exciting moment because a lot of people were anticipating Trump follow through on this, especially, I imagine, RFK Jr. So it's a cool moment for him as a human on a heart-to-heart level, and it's also a good moment for the American people and transparency and truth being restored to America. Now, I know people are eager to find out who killed JFK and why, but I don't want to bait you here because we don't know yet. And everything you see on social media over the next several days and weeks, you should be skeptical of because no one has read all 63,000 pages by now, and I doubt that anyone's going to do it. And what will really happen is a combination of internet sleuths and JFK historians who have been doing this for decades will go deep into the material, and we'll see what the collective consciousness uncovers about what's been going on. But for now, I'm going to give you the biggest highlight from the early findings just to satisfy some of your curiosity in the meantime. So there are some comments from people about one particularly interesting file, or rather a page in a particular file, where a man called Gary Underhill claims that CIA killed JFK. And here is that document. Oh, you guys see that one? So that is not the right document. Give me a second here. And that is the right document. So if you read it closely, what you'll see is that there's a man who is named Gary Underhill who has connections to the CIA, who claimed shortly after JFK was assassinated that the CIA had a hand in his assassination. And then get this, Gary, 6 months later, was found dead from a gunshot wound in what the authorities called a suicide. Wink, wink. So, obviously, an interesting tidbit. This is something that's new, some details that we did not have before. I would caution, though, it's one page in 63,000 pages. If it's the only page that says that, I would just use a huge grain of salt, because just like if someone today made the claim that JFK was killed by the CIA and we only had one statement of that, you would want to be skeptical, right? You should also be skeptical of a claim that was made 50 to 60 years ago. That said, it's still something that's interesting and worth considering, and something that we should consider when we think of the different possibilities for who killed JFK. And the way I invite you to think about this, and just think about any kind of situation that has multiple causes or multiple possibilities, is don't think of this in terms of like binary. Don't think of this in terms of, oh, either CIA killed JFK or CIA didn't kill JFK. Instead, I invite you to think of this in terms of a distribution of probabilities. So you might think it's 50% likely that Lee Harvey Oswald killed JFK. And maybe you think it's 20% likely that the CIA killed him. And then there's people who believe that Israel's Mossad killed him, and maybe you rank that at 10%. And then you look at the distribution of probabilities and figure out, okay, well, this might be the most likely probability. What evidence do I have to corroborate that versus the second most likely possibility? But it's a new clue that's interesting, and I don't want to take that away from you, because we've been waiting for this information a long time, right? So, with that said, just return this here. With that said, I don't want to be a buzzkill, but there's some things that you should know. And as I give you this info, note that I'm going to give you a bunch of numbers, and all of them are rounded. They're not exact, but just for the sake of clarity and ease. So there's about 63,000 pages that just got released. And I know that sounds like a lot of new material, but what you might not know is the JFK assassination records have been released over the last 60 years, and there's already about 6.2 million pages out there. So 99% of the JFK records have already been released, and that's been happening since 1964. So 63,000 out of 6.2 million is only like 1%. And the first really big push happened in the 90s. So what happened is, in 1992, George H.W. Bush signed the Assassination Records Collection Act of 1992. And that was a watershed moment, because it led to the declassification of millions of pages around the JFK files under largely Clinton. So it was the end of H.W. Bush's presidency, and it happened mostly under Clinton. So during the 90s, we had millions of these pages released. And actually, little known fact, in 2022, Biden released 13,000 more documents, and he removed some redactions from old documents. But it was kind of a non-story, because not much new information came out of that. And then in 2017, Trump released 2,800 documents, but that was delayed and incomplete, and it didn't give us game-changing information either. So this new release only represents about 1% of all material ever released about JFK. And the likelihood that we learn some like earth-shattering, groundbreaking realization is, as a result, low. That said, there are some things that make this release particularly special. One is it's the release of 2,400 previously unreleased FBI records. And these weren't records that were just sitting around waiting to be declassified. They were newly found as a part of Trump's push. So I want you to distinguish that from, for example, in Trump 1 or during Biden's term, they released documents that they already knew that they had. They were just classified. Here, the FBI actually found new documents. I don't know if they like found it under the couch or where they it was hiding, but they found new documents. And that's something that came about specifically because Trump ordered this new effort to release everything and find anything that was unreleased and needed to be released. The discovery also adds a unique layer of intrigue because it suggests that there might be gaps in what we thought was a complete collection. Because prior to Trump's order, we thought we had all the documents, but this suggests that there were at least 2,400 new documents. And who knows, maybe as they continue searching, they'll continue to find new stuff. And it's also special because of the 1,124 documents or 1,124 documents that were released were formally redacted or withheld from the public, which means that there's information that was blocked out that is no longer blocked out. And out of some of the new information, there's some interesting tidbits that aren't necessarily directly connected to the assassination, but are still relevant. For example, JFK apparently had secret meetings with Fidel Castro and Nixon. And I'll show you that document here, which is cool and kind of unexpected because, yeah, I don't think many people have an image of JFK directly meeting with Fidel Castro and Nixon at the same time. So that's a bit unexpected and an interesting detail. Additionally, Lee Harvey Oswald trained in the USSR, but apparently he was a pretty bad shot. He wasn't like some expert marksman. And from the salacious details we get about the tidbits of his marriage was kind of a mess. So he doesn't strike you as some Jason Bourne lone master assassin material. And you can use that to, again, discount the probability of Lee Harvey Oswald acting alone, or maybe it increases the possibility and maybe you think he was just some deranged dude who was having a bad life and decided, I want to kill the president. But those are some interesting, juicy tidbits that I don't think are dispositive of any particular conclusion, but there are things about the files that also reinforce existing theories. For example, there's additional evidence that JFK had a rocky relationship with the CIA, which adds more fuel to the, I don't like calling it conspiracy theory. I actually really dislike the term conspiracy theory. I like to think of them as alternative hypotheses. So there's some additional information about, yeah, JFK had legitimate beef with the CIA, and it looks like the CIA did too, but it doesn't necessarily prove that he was killed by the CIA. But again, account for that in your probability distribution of what happened. So where does this leave us? Well, the JFK case has been looked into for about 60 years with about 6 million documents released. And the consensus among historians is that Lee Harvey Oswald acted alone. So you can consider that the highest probability outcome. And as I mentioned before, there are other non-zero probabilities like the CIA or Mossad or whoever else killing him. And in the meantime, we just got to be patient because it'll take a while to get through the new 63,000 pages. But considering that it's less than 1% of a total pages released, the chances of a bombshell being dropped are low, but I'm remain hopeful. I'll be honest with you, on an emotional level, it's kind of like it's kind of disappointing to not have like Trump drops the JFK files. All of a sudden, the whole world knows the truth. And I think all of us, or at least I did, harbor a bit of a fantasy that that would happen. But that's real life. Sometimes, rather than engaging in mystical theories about what might be, it's better to just meet reality as it is and be open to the possibility of magic as well. So as of March 18th, the National Records Archive has stated that all records previously held withheld due to classification have been released either online or for in-person access at their facilities. And this recent release was intended to cover all remaining classified documents. So there's not supposed to be anything left over that is not already released or they're not planning to release. There are some documents that still have not been fully made public due to specific legal restrictions. So there's documents that are under court seal, and those take longer to release, or records protected by grand jury secrecy rules, which takes longer to release, or materials that are governed by IRS regulations, like tax return information. Now, just to be super clear, the plan is to release those two. It just takes longer because Trump's executive order was to release all of the files for not only JFK, but also RFK and MLK. And I'm actually really interested to hear about the MLK stuff too, because there's been a lot of theorizing about who killed JFK. I don't think there's been the same depth of examination of MLK's situation. So there you have it. Maybe it's disappointing. Maybe it's what you expect. I think the takeaway for me, though, because look, ultimately that was something that happened 60 years ago, is I'm just happy to see Trump deliver on a promise. And who knows? Maybe there's a needle in this haystack that'll surprise us. And for now, just stay curious, but also stay skeptical. And I will keep you posted as more comes to light. Okay. So now let's see if any of you had any questions about this particular thing. So again, if you're a subscriber on X, a subscriber on Instagram, or a member on YouTube, first of all, thank you. I appreciate you because I'm a life coach by trade, actually, and I'm starting to make commenting and sense making and just helping people to get to the truth my full-time thing. So you really are enabling the next chapter of my life. So thank you. And I'm going to check to see if there's any comments from anyone. I know we had one on an unrelated topic yesterday, which I will get to, but first let me see if there's any JFK specific stuff. So let's check YouTube here. Let's check X here. Okay. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to read out some comments from subscribers that I didn't get to before that I really want to get to. So Lisa Doherty Shank, I'm not sure she's here right now, but when I talked about Mahmoud Khalil, the Palestinian activist who was arrested and might get deported by Trump's team because of his alleged connection to endorsing or espousing terrorist activity, which depending on, you can take that for what it's worth. I've talked in other videos about how much there is to that claim, but that's basically the claim. Lisa responded that Americans have the right to 100% free speech. If you're not an American, you're here as our guest and you're costing the taxpayer funded universities millions of dollars. She's referring to the fact that Mahmoud Khalil was organizing protests at Columbia University, where they're having wide scale pro-Palestine protests and have been having that since pretty much October 7th. You're causing students to be afraid, blocking access to the pursuit of education, and you need to be deported. Yeah, this is a really interesting nuance because what Lisa said at the beginning here is Americans have the right to 100% free speech. Mahmoud Khalil is not an American. He is a green card holder. And by that, I mean he's not an American citizen. So as I mentioned in my Mahmoud Khalil video, as a green card holder, he is subject to certain restrictions that American citizens are not. Basically, that means that he doesn't have full First Amendment protections. So, for example, if he is found to be saying something that is pro-Hamas, which he has links to, it's unclear to the extent to which he's directly said anything, he can be deported simply on that basis under immigration law. So he doesn't actually need to be convicted of a crime. He doesn't actually need to like send money to a terrorist group. Merely him endorsing or espousing terrorist activity could be enough to get him kicked out. So that's an important nuance because I think a lot of people, when they think of America, they think it's total free speech. If you're here, you get full free speech rights, but that's not true. There's sort of a two-tiered level of protection, and green card holders do not get the same level of protection. That said, they're still entitled to due process. I think it's personally really important that the Trump administration makes it clear in their own words what specifically Mahmoud Khalil has done that warrants deportation. And then people, reasonable minds can disagree about the rationale, but so far they've been pretty vague. They've just said like pro-Hamas, but we need to see like what specific statements did he make that they consider pro-Hamas, not just so that people know that there's justice being served here, but also so that they know that the Trump administration is not just going to use any kind of vague criteria for removing people from the country. And sorry, there, getting like allergies, spring allergies. And also so that people who are here in the country feel safe and they feel like they know what the rules are. And I, in my videos, went pretty deep into Mahmoud Khalil's connections to Columbia University Apartheid Divest, which is a pro-Palestine student coalition at Columbia University. that Mahmoud was a lead negotiator on, and Quad, as I call it, CUAD, they've clearly made pro-Hamas statements. I mean, on the anniversary of October 7th, they celebrated October 7th as a moral, political, and military victory. Now, the question is, how liable is Mahmoud Khalil for the statements made by Quad? Because he was a lead negotiator. So does that mean he's a leader and responsible for things that they said? He said he has nothing to do with the posts that were made by Quad saying these things. But there's also a question of, okay, well, if you're a leader of the organization and the organization makes a statement, are you liable? Because the risk of not making them liable is that anyone can hide behind their organization, make a bunch of wild statements and say, oh, I didn't make that. So I'm not going to go super deep onto that because I've covered it elsewhere, but that's what Lisa was commenting on, and I'm glad we got to that comment. Another comments. This was from yesterday about Nicaragua, which is similar, actually, because it's about deporting people who are not strictly U.S. citizens. Cordell Pickering said, what mechanisms are in place to ensure due process for individuals accused of gang affiliations under expedited deportation protocols? Yeah, so to catch everyone up here, and you can go check the video on my profile where I covered some of the nuances of the Tren de Agua situation, but just to recap you, earlier this week, Trump's team deported 238 Venezuelans from America who Immigrations and Customs Enforcement identified as members of the gang Tren de Agua, or TDA. And TDA is infamous for having killed Laken Riley and just having terrorized towns across the US. And regardless of like the way in which this was done, we just need to get these people out of the country, like period. These are clearly violent criminals. Now, the concern here is that Trump did something called invoking the Alien Enemies Act of 1798. And the Alien Enemies Act, you know, the Democrats and liberal leadership are calling a zombie law. But I mean, we use the Constitution, and that's old too, right? So it's a law, and it was clever for the Trump team to find it and to use it. Now, here's where things get tricky, because the Alien Enemies Act says that in the event of war against a foreign government, or in the event of invasion or predation by a foreign nation or government, the president reserves the right to deport alien enemies. And the rationale here is, you know, let's say it's World War I or World War II, and we have like a communist invasion, right? Like the KGB sends a bunch of communists into the country. You want the president to have executive authority to just remove those people from the country. And there's very little due process when that happens. The Alien Enemies Act of 1798 has only been invoked 3 times. Once during the War of 1812 against the British, once during World War I, and in World War II. It's never been used in peacetime, right? It's always been in an officially declared state of war, which I believe Congress needs to actually ratify a war declaration. So it's unprecedented for a president to use his authority this way. However, it's not necessarily unconstitutional. So the reason I say that all is because there's actually very little due process involved if the president invokes the Alien Enemies Act. And that's by design, right? Like you don't actually, in an emergency situation like a war or an alien invasion, an enemy invasion, you don't want to have to go through a bunch of due process and like a long legal process. You just need to get people who are clearly the enemy out. But the problem is, what happens when you're in peacetime and there's not someone that is clearly the enemy? Or what happens if among the 238 people from TDA that you deported, you rush things and there's actually a few innocent men who got lumped in with these criminals because maybe they had a tattoo, or maybe they had a brother who was in Tren de Agua, but they weren't. And now you just got shipped off to a maximum security prison in El Salvador. So that's the concern here. And yeah, the truth is there's not much due process. One of the protections here is, although it's unclear whether a judge can actually like block the deportation, and that's something that needs to be worked out in the courts, what the judicial system can absolutely do is initiate a judicial review. And that's what's happening right now. So originally what happened was Judge Boasberg tried to, I think he's a district judge, I'm not entirely sure. he tried to block Trump's effort to deport these, at least most of them were TDA members, if not all of them. And by the time that he issued the verbal order, a lot of these planes were already over international waters. And by the time that he issued the written order, they were either over international waters or they were already in El Salvador. But some of the people who are critics actually claim that some of the planes, or at least one of the planes, was actually still in the United States when the written order was issued. So the timeline's unclear. That needs to be hashed out in the courts, but that's just some context on what's going on. But look, I think, as I mentioned on yesterday's stream, the priority needs to be national security and safety. We know some of these people were definitely criminals. ICE issued a sworn statement saying that they have a high degree of confidence that these people were Tren de Agua members and sworn criminals. And I think it's reasonable to trust that they did the due diligence, because they didn't just like get up one day and round up 238 prisoners. They've been tracking these people for a while. And I also think it's helpful to have checks and balances. So I'm glad that there's a judicial review. So good question, Cordell. You're very consistent with asking great questions, and I appreciate your consistent support. Okay. Let's see if there's any comments in the chat from any subscribers that I recognize. Again, if you are a subscriber in the chat and I'm missing what you say, part of the problem here, guys, is there's just so many people in the chat and commenting. And I appreciate everyone who's commenting, whether you're a subscriber or not. See really beautiful comments. Daniel Lawson, thank you. This is a really kind thing to say. Let's see. Reagan telling me to get out of California. I'm actually considering moving. Here. Yeah, so just thank you everyone for the comments, and yeah, it just feels nice to have people who are rooting for me and rooting for what I'm doing, and I hope that you're enjoying the stream so far. Okay, so for our next act, let's talk about Tim Walz. So Tim Walz, who was the governor of Minnesota and currently still is, and the vice presidential candidate in 2024 under Kamala, is trending today for comments that he's made about Tesla, masculinity, and his critics. First, I want you to check out this comment that he made yesterday at a town hall event that he did in Wisconsin.
Phone. I don't know, some of you know this on the iPhone. They've got that little stock app. I added Tesla to it to give me a little boost during the day. 225 and dropping. So, and if you own one, we're not blaming you. You can take dental floss and pull the Tesla thing off, you know, and take out, just telling you.
It's all so tiresome sometimes, you know. Anyway, so this guy is a governor of Minnesota, so he's not some random Joe Schmo, even though he lost the election. And first, I want to talk about why he brought up Tesla at all at this event. Well, the town hall event is to support a liberal candidate for Wisconsin Supreme Court against a conservative who is being funded by a political action committee, or PAC, that is receiving funding from Elon Musk. Now, I've commented in other videos about what's going on with people literally torching Teslas, putting swastikas on Teslas, and blowing up charging stations. And there's also been reports of names and addresses of Tesla owners being released to the public, with the publisher refusing to take down that private information unless the owner sells their vehicle. Okay, think about how crazy that is. Private citizens are literally vandalizing the private property of other private citizens, working and middle-class people, and releasing their information to the public with their names and their addresses where their kids live over politics. Like, that's where we are in the country right now. And some of this is just straight up terrorism. So it's against that backdrop that, as a former Democrat, I say this. It really is deeply disappointing to see Democratic leaders continue to stand for nothing but negativity. Terrorism is defined as the systematic use of terror, especially as a means of coercion. These people are terrorists and they should be treated accordingly. If you are blowing up Tesla charging stations, you are a terrorist. If you are setting Teslas on fire, you are a terrorist. If you are doxing people and exposing them to harm, you are a terrorist. This is domestic terrorism. This is not an act of protest. It's instilling fear and terror in Americans, like fellow citizens. Over what? Like, people are reacting to a fear of the future, like a fear that this is going to turn into the Fourth Reich, some sort of fascist state. I haven't seen the military being used to round up American citizens. And yet people are harming other American citizens because of a fear. And rather than seeing this, and as a leader, as a governor of a state of liberals and conservatives, Democrats and Republicans, rather than saying, hey, look, this is just too far, we need to stop doing this. And he could say he doesn't like Trump. He can say he doesn't like MAGA. He can say he doesn't like the direction that the Republicans are bringing the country, and they need to resist the Republicans through every legal means possible. Rather than rallying his base to an alternative vision of the future, Tim Walz and other Democratic leaders are feeding into the negativity. Now, make no mistake, negativity is a part of politics. And I've been critical of Trump's negativity in past videos too. But at least he couples that with a positive vision. That's literally in the name of the movement. Make America great again. That's a positive vision. It's a vision of a safe, wealthy, powerful, ambitious America. But right now, the Democratic leaders don't appear to have any real position. And instead of articulating a vision, Tim Walz is celebrating the decline of one of America's great companies, who employs 70,000 people in the United States, whose stock has changed the lives of millions of middle-class Americans, whose vehicles are driven by millions of Americans, who single-handedly accomplished a major part of the climate change agenda that Democrats have been pushing for by popularizing electric vehicles. So now what we have is working class people damaging the property of other working and middle class citizens. And instead of saying, hey, that's too far, no matter what your concerns are about what Trump is doing or what Elon's doing, rather than saying, hey, we need to stop this because this is actually hurting America, he's celebrating the drop of a stock price. But, you know, the deeper insight is this. Tim Walz and other Democratic leaders don't seem to understand half the country. And I want you to check out this comment from him in a conversation that he had with Gavin Newsom on Gavin Newsom's new podcast. Check this out.
Baffled me how much time they spent trying to attack me that I wasn't like masculine enough in their vision. Like, I would have never believed this. I saw Fox News did like a couple days because I used a straw. And I'm like, hell, man, what am I? How else do you drink a milkshake type of thing? But they focused on it obsessively, which I think, again, is their obsession, their weirdness. We buy their frame on these issues of sexuality, you know, but their whole thing is that they spent all their time, these guys on Fox News, that Walz is gay, he's not masculine, you know, he doesn't coach football the way he should or doesn't. What do you think about this? I mean,
no, I mean, it's what
this misogyny in here that's happening.
Yeah, well, but this notion of masculinity is deeply part of it. That's one of the. I mean, I think it goes. You know, and you can look at the reasons why we've had this sort of dialectic over the Me Too movement. We've had this dialectic even prior to the Me Too movement. This
How
notion
do you fight it?
And well, this notion
I think
of
I could kick most of their ass. I do think that if they wanted to. I know I can run them, but I don't know if we're going to fall into that place where we want to. Okay, we challenge you to a WWE fight here type of thing.
No.
So Tim Walz is talking about masculinity while childishly celebrating negativity and talking about kicking the asses of voters as a 60-year-old man. And I get he's trying to be funny, but he's literally talking about getting into physical fights with voters. This is not him calling out Trump. This is not him calling out his political opposition leaders. He's talking about masculinity while trying to press other American voters, some of which, by the way, live in Minnesota and voted for Trump. Now, I'll say this for Gavin Newsom. I don't like what I've seen of Newsom as a California taxpayer who just watched his city burn down and had friends lose their houses. But I appreciate his willingness to actually talk to the other side. He's had Charlie Kirk and other conservatives on, and he appears open to understanding where the Democrats have gone wrong. And I know that some people think it's just a facade and he's just gearing up for a 2020 election, but still, he gets credit for stepping into the arena and actually talking to people who disagree, actually admitting, yes, having biological men in sports with biological women is biologically crazy. But Tim is instead choosing to just punch down, not on his political rivals, but on an entire movement of people who support them. And if this were just Tim Walz, I'd probably ignore it. But he's representative of an entire worldview that seems to have a problem with everything and solutions for nothing. Tim, the reason people don't find you masculine has little to do with hunting or trucks. It's because you're a 60-year-old man complaining about people not finding you masculine while also claiming you could kick the asses of voters. You don't understand men or masculinity. Men don't want to see their borders open for foreign men to enter at will. Men don't want to see kids sex trafficked over an open border. Men don't want to die in pointless wars. Men don't want to see their money sent to other countries for other men to die in foreign wars. Men don't want to see men in women's sports. Men don't want to see their kids being told that man and woman are just social constructs in schools that we pay taxpayer money for. And men are tired of being called misogynists for saying no to this stuff. And if Democrats keep on demonizing us, we will keep rejecting them. So that's what's going on with men and masculinity. And what I would like to see from the Democratic Party is healthy opposition, because this is toxic. Torching Teslas is toxic. Releasing the identities and addresses of private individuals, that's toxic. This is terrorism. And I want to see leaders on both sides calling it out. Of course, Republicans are pointing it out because it's easy for them. But for Democratic leaders, I would actually gain a lot of respect for you guys if you did it when it's hard. If you did it even when you know that people in your party might not like the fact that you're holding the people who voted for you to account. Because this is not a game. Okay, this is real life. And if we have the complete collapse of law and order and fellow citizens are damaging each other's private properties and literally trying to instill terror in each other, then we've completely lost the plot. And this whole democracy thing is going to be a failure. So look, I think there's legitimate grievances to have with the way that Elon and Trump are going about trying to do what they think is right. And I'm even okay with Democratic, senators and congressmen saying we're just going to oppose what they do no matter what. I don't think it's thoughtful, but both sides do it. That's not something new to politics. That's been happening since the nation was founded. But if we can't get to the point where we say, yeah, outright violence in the streets, and this is not like a riot or a protest that got out of hand, by the way. This is people deliberately going out to key vehicles, to paint swastikas, to release identities of people, right? This is premeditated, cold-blooded terrorism. If we can't call that out, what are we even doing here? Seriously. So yeah, there's just it's strange, like I voted Democrat my whole life before 2024. And I've been thinking, I was like, did I leave the Democratic Party or did the party leave me? Because look, I'm very excited about Trump. I'm even more excited about the team that he has around him with Elon and RFK and Tulsi Gabbard, all of whom were former Democrats, by the way. Elon actually stood in line for hours to go shake Obama's hands. Like, these people are not ideologues. So I'm very excited about that. But I'm also open-minded. For me, voting for Vance in 2028 is not a lock. I want to see results from Trump. I want to see him deliver on his promises. And so far, in my view, good. But there's a huge portion of the country who's not committed to a strong conservative or strong liberal position. We just want to see common sense policy. We want to see people focusing on what's important. We want to see people focusing on the majority issues while protecting the minority, but not giving into fringe ideologues and radicals. And there's an opportunity to like win us back. But what you're doing right now is disgusting. It's genuinely disgusting. It's disgusting. It's childish, and it's actually shocking. And I don't think it always was the case. And you know, someone asked me, like, what is going on? Like, why are we at this point from a more zoomed out philosophical perspective? I think we're going through an evolutionary moment and an awakening as a species. And there's a lot of fear on the planet. And I think the two primary things that are happening is there's fear and there's identification. And you can think of identification as tribalism, right? So people identifying with a particular group or tribe. And I think what's going on here is people are in a lot of pain and a lot of fear, and they don't know how to deal with it. There's just a lot of emotional, unresolved trauma that's happening on an individual and societal level. And people are so unself-aware that they're just spewing their pain outward rather than resolving what's actually going on. And when people are angry, it's usually because they're afraid of something. So I'm compassionate and sympathetic to the fact that some of these people are just acting out because they don't know how to deal with their emotions otherwise. Doesn't mean we should allow what they're doing, but I see where it's coming from psychologically. And when people are in fear, they double down on their identity. So people double down on whatever identity it could be. It could be your racial identity. It can be your political affiliation. Hell, it could be your sports team. It can be your religious affiliation. But when people are feeling scared, they double down on what they feel safe with and what they feel like they know. And this is a bipartisan analysis, just so you understand. This happens with every human ever, happens with me, everyone. And it's good to have group associations, right? Like, everyone needs a unit that is smaller than country, because country is really abstract. So, you know, it's good for people to have religious associations and political associations and family units and all that. The problem is when we become so attached to these identifications that we dehumanize other people. When we dehumanize other people and we become so attached to our tribe that we don't see people from other tribes as even human, we start to justify things like literal physical violence toward other people. That's how any kind of genocidal movement at scale happens. You literally dehumanize people. You know, there's this really interesting painting called Ordinary Men. And it depicts a bunch of men in a park, just on a beautiful sunny day with their wives and their children. Just ordinary men, nothing really special about them. And then what you realize is that those ordinary men are actually Nazi soldiers. And you wonder, wow, in that context, they seem so human. So how can people who are human do these awful things that they did in the Holocaust? Well, what happens is when people are so identified with their tribe, they don't even register the other tribe as human. They can do anything. They can do anything to someone who they don't view as human. And that's what I fear is starting to happen. I think it really bothered me when I saw the Luigi Mangione thing, the United Healthcare killer, because I understood that people are in pain and they're very frustrated with the state of healthcare. They're very frustrated that the cost of healthcare is too high. And like, it's like you either have to choose between being bankrupt for life or saving your life. Like, that's gross. And we need to fix that as a country. Absolutely. But when we get to the point where we start demonizing and dehumanizing other people to the point where we're celebrating violence and people are deifying and valorizing Luigi Mangione as some sort of folk hero when he walked up to a man who has a wife and kids and shot him in the streets, something is dysfunctional. Something is deeply wrong. We need to have that as a reality check and wake up and see, look, there are problems. This is not the way that we fix them, ever. Because if you enact violence, you will beget violence. If you sow violence, you will reap violence. That's why we have civil society. Because the ugly truth is, the bottom line of nature is violence. In a state of nature, that's how things are resolved. You look at animals, the way that they live, they kill each other. It's violence. There's no morality there. And that's largely how it used to be before we invented this great thing called civil society. But if we lose civil society, how do we resolve our disagreements? Violence. So people celebrate it when the violence is against someone that they don't register as human. And by the way, this happens to people at all levels, right? Like, it's easy for people to recognize the evil in being violent toward a oppressed minority or a religious minority or some sort of ethnic group. Like, everyone gets that. But even being violent towards someone who's powerful, like the United Healthcare CEO, or, you know, Elon Musk is getting death threats, or someone tried to kill Trump, it's all dehumanization because they're all humans. And it always comes back. The pendulum always swings back in the other direction. So yeah, I'm just really disappointed that our leaders don't act like leaders. I mean, I guess at some level, maybe I was naive that these people had an ounce of leadership in their body, but to see it revealed and the constant behavior of some of these people it's sad. It's sad. But look, ultimately, politicians are a reflection of the culture that's created by the people. Tim Walz's will come and go. I think he's a fairly unimpressive politician. I'm surprised he made it to the governor of Minnesota. I'm sure he's done some great things for his state. He's definitely not presidential material. But politicians come and go. Politicians are produced by cultures. And it's important for us as individuals to treat each other with kindness and decency and recognize, hey, if we can't be civil, then violence is the next step. And we don't want things to get violent. So it's incumbent on us to not be so violent in our speech, not be so violent in how we talk about people online and how we comment, because yeah, we are all creating the culture with every thought that we allow to permeate our brains, with every word that we allow to leave our lips, with every statement that we make toward our fellow human. And we got to take responsibility for that because we are the culture. And I think people are forgetting that. People are emphasizing freedom, but there's not a lot of conversation about responsibility. And yeah, freedom without responsibility is chaos. Like, everyone's always talking about my rights, my freedoms, but you also got to take responsibility for that. And it's like, when you see people behaving the way that they are, it's like, yeah, like eventually Trump is going to have to lay down the law. Right? People talk about the military being used against American citizens. Well, if American citizens are blowing up Teslas and harassing each other, then eventually you do need to get to a point where the National Guard needs to get involved, and no one wants that to happen. So let's start by individual citizens by recognizing we need to regulate ourselves, regulate our emotions, figure out civil ways to resolve disagreements. Look, the court system is getting in Elon and Trump's way every step of the way. I know it's annoying to some people who are pro-Trump, but I think it's also healthy. And anti-Trump people should look at that and say, look, the judiciary system is working as intended. So why are we doing this? We don't need any of this stuff, guys. And this would be different if like legitimately American citizens were being rounded up and shot in the streets. Like, great. That's why we have the Second Amendment. Like, I'm not one of these people who's like, trust the government no matter what. No, I'm very skeptical of the government. I'm skeptical of any leader, and I'm scrutinizing all of these people. Hopefully I will be able to see something before it goes wrong, and I will say it. But until then, like, these are extreme measures that are completely disproportionate to whatever perceived harm is being done. Like, what exactly are the rights that people think they're losing right now that justify this level of violence? What exactly is happening that justifies acting this way toward your fellow citizen? Craziness, nonsense. So yeah, we need to all individually, I'm talking to everyone who's watching the stream right now, everyone in the chat, we all create the culture. So we all have a responsibility for modeling the kind of behavior we want to see in the world, even if lunatics are not doing the same thing. Okay. Had to get that off my chest. Hope you like that. So, where was I? Whew. Okay. Going to take some questions from subscribers. Once again, if you're a subscriber on Instagram, a subscriber on X, or a member on YouTube, I've posted private threads where you guys can ask me questions that you want me to answer on stream. You know what I just realized? I messed up. I did not post a thread for the Instagram subscribers. So I'm so sorry about that. I will make sure to post that after the stream, and I'll get to the questions from my subscribers there. And for all of you who are supporting me, it's not lost on me that you're parting with your hard-earned money to help support me with my hard-earned work, and I really appreciate it. So thank you. So with that said, let me see if there's any other questions from people before we start to wrap this up. First, let's check X. Okay, dokie here. And again, if you're commenting in the chat with your questions and your subscriber, strongly encourage you to instead comment on the private thread, just because with the chat, it's really fast moving. When I'm on stream, I'm locked in and focused on talking to the camera. So I'm definitely going to miss the majority of what people say there. So if you want me to respond to you, just go ahead and post in the private chat so that I can, or post in the private thread so I can get to you. Okay, looks like I covered all the questions that came from X. Looks like it's the same for YouTube and Instagram followers. Again, I will get back to you later. I am again sorry for not getting to you with a private thread earlier, but we're gonna make sure we solve that. Okay, let's see here. Oh, Tova left. You are a subscriber. Let me see what you got to say. They have become the same things they said Trump, Elon, and their teams were. Yeah. It's a massive projection. And this is what happens when people lack self-awareness. They accuse other people of doing the same thing that they were doing. That's what they do. It's like, I think it's part of the psychology of some of these people who are engaging in acts of terrorism with the Tesla stuff is that, well, I need to do this because if I don't do it, Trump and Elon are going to be the end of America. But what they don't realize is that America rests on the promise of civil resolution of disagreements. So if you are not engaging in civil resolution of disagreements, you are ending America. That's just how it works. So you're accusing other people of doing what you yourself are doing. And people are justifying it by saying, well, Trump is going to end America. Well, again, there's degrees of this. If you don't like the things that he's doing, like deporting Venezuelan gangs because you're concerned that there's not due process, okay, that can be resolved civilly in court. If you don't like Mahmoud Khalil getting arrested on a green card for having alleged ties to endorsing terrorist activities, okay, well, great. We have the ACLU and civil rights activists, and a judge blocked a deportation order. Once again, this is being handled through civil means. It'd be a lot different if there was a bunch of police brutality and people were getting beat up and just yanked out of their homes that were American citizens. It would be a lot different. But that's not what's happening. So it's a disproportionate response at minimum to what's happening. And these people don't seem to realize it. And they need to wake up and realize that actually what they're doing is perpetuating the problem. Because in addition to the problems that they're bringing, what they're now doing is they're justifying the same level of force against them. And that's really scary. Okay? Because now, ironically, what they're doing is they're putting their own safety and the safety of other American citizens in Trump's hands. And we now need to trust that Trump has the restraint to not bring down the hammer in a way that is overly punitive to everyone. Scary, right? Because if you're actually worried about a fascist dictator taking away your rights, well, you better not give a fascist dictator a reason to take away your rights, right? It's just logic fails all over the place. Like, if you actually think this is a fascist dictator, doesn't it make sense to pursue things through the most legal civil means possible rather than give them provocation and every reason to go after you? So yeah, Tova left. That's a great comment. I totally agree with you. Like, these people are not only acting in a way that is completely irrational, they're acting in a way that is self-defeating and going to hurt them and going to hurt other Americans. So yeah, they think they're freedom fighters, but they're actually just creating chaos and hurting themselves. Okay, let's see here. Once again, if you're commenting with questions and I'm not commenting on your question in the chat, it is not because I don't care about your question. In fact, I would love to answer all your questions, but that is something that I want to give as a special privilege to people who are supporting me as subscribers. So that's what's going on there. But I will comment on like some of the general themes I'm seeing in the chat here. So let's see. Yeah, you know, here's another thing with it's like with the way I see Democrats behaving, right? It's like, you know, so I it almost sounds pretentious to say my awakening, but I had voted Democrat my whole life. I was basically Democrat by default. And I'm from New York, I'm black, I went to Harvard, I worked in tech, I live in California. So I was basically a Democrat by default. I never really paid attention to politics. I was a good little New York Times reader, CNN listener. I just voted Democrat, right? I was very excited when Obama won. I was like, cool, black guy like me. He seems smart, well-spoken. I'm sure this guy will be good. Didn't really follow what he did. Didn't really care. I think that's the way a lot of people operate in politics generally. I don't mind. I don't think everyone needs to be the kind of person who's on X all day like me and talking about this stuff and reading about this stuff. That's fine. But that's how I used to be. I bought all the stuff about Trump being a bad person, him being a racist, misogynist, grab him by the pussy, all of this stuff, right? And then in 2020, I remember looking at my inbox and seeing a headline from New York Times that was negative about Trump. And I had the realization, wow, I feel like literally every time I see New York Times talk about Trump, it's always negative. And if they're supposed to be a news organization, surely there's something positive to say about this guy. Now, I was not pro-Trump at the time at all. It was in 2020, but I knew enough to realize if someone's only giving me one side of the story, then they're biased. So I unsubscribed from New York Times. I was like, I don't know what the truth is, but I know I'm not getting it from these people. Then 2024 comes around, and it was actually, I went to Egypt in late 2023, and I went from like a spiritual pilgrimage, find out about my past lives or whatever you go to Egypt for, and just to have some fun. And I was actually there the week after October 7th, the Hamas attack. And it was a big wake-up call because I just saw how much we are in crisis as a species. And I was a few hundred miles away from the Gaza Strip, and I wasn't even sure if I could leave the country. And yeah, it like jolted me back to being present with what was going on in the world, because I was very disconnected from current events, and that jolted me back. And then I started paying attention to politics domestically. And one of the first things that made me suspicious was when I saw that Trump got hit with a felony charge, and I realized that most of the people celebrating the fact that he got hit with a felony charge didn't even know what he was convicted of a felony for and didn't look at the facts of the case. And they were just happy that this guy was labeled a felon. They didn't really care what he was labeled a felony for. And once again, I was not pro-Trump by any stretch of the imagination, but I knew if people don't even know why they hate someone, then maybe the reasons that they hate them aren't fully justified. Then I started to go down the rabbit hole of reviewing things that I had been told about Trump, and I just realized a lot of them were not true. The most infamous example is the very fine people hoax. People saying that Trump is a white supremacist and claim that neo-Nazis and white supremacists are very fine people, which is just not true. You can literally just go watch the YouTube video. It's not even long. You can probably watch it in 5 minutes, and you can see the part where he multiple times condemns white nationalists and neo-Nazis. And then I was like, oh, wow. I thought when people say the news is fake, they meant that they occasionally get something wrong. No. They're literally just reporting the opposite of what's happening. But still, I wasn't fully on board with Trump at that time. Still very, had a lot of negative beliefs that were hard to just discard in one go. Still default Democrat. Then the day that I saw Biden on the debate stage, essentially senile, I realized the Democratic Party was either incompetent or evil. It was hard for me to tell. But at the extreme, malevolence looks like incompetence and incompetence looks like malevolence. So it didn't even matter to me. I was like, this guy has been running the country, or perhaps even scarier, he hasn't been running the country. Either way, I want nothing to do with it. So at that point, I was like, I'm not voting for these people. And at that time, I was like, I still don't feel fully comfortable with Trump. I'm on Team RFK. Started listening to some interviews with him, started getting the long-term perspective. I was like, they've been calling this guy conspiracy theorist, but not only does this guy talk like someone who actually has looked into the details himself, I also feel his heart in it. I feel he really cares about this and he's willing to be killed if it helps with children getting autism resolved and resolving this toxic soup that's leading to this uptick in chronic diseases that we don't know the reasons for. And he's not even saying that vaccines necessarily cause it. He's saying we need to ask questions of everything because it's probably multiply caused. And we need to start being comfortable with curiosity rather than dogma. That resonated with me. And the day, and you can actually go look at old videos where I was like, yeah, I like RFK. I'm not fully on board with Trump because Trump is too divisive. And then something changed on July 13th when Trump nearly got assassinated. And I actually felt my heart just like jump out of my chest. It was a moment that, when you have those moments that it's not even like a cognitive, you feel it in your body, something just like there's a response. That's the response I got that day when I saw Trump nearly get assassinated and put up his fist. And I realized, oh, wow, this guy is different than who I thought he is. He's grown and he's willing to die to do something here. And I also realized that as much as I liked RFK, there's a level of potency and charisma that Trump has that is necessary to go up against what I realized was a bigger problem, which was this unelected government, or you can call it the deep state, this military industrial complex that is getting us into wars constantly, squandering American lives, wasting American taxpayer money. And yeah, we need someone who's literally willing to die in order to resolve this, literally willing to fight all of this stuff. And that was the day that I realized, oh, wow, I think Trump is the answer. Yes, he brings his problems, but he's a solution to a bigger problem. And that's when I realized my heart and my mind disagreed. So I needed to get my mind on board. And that's when I started to do even more research and I documented the whole journey. And I think that's how a lot of people found me, especially on Instagram. So what I mentioned all that. Throughout this journey, there was still a level of doubt. There was still a level of, what if I'm wrong? What if Trump is secretly some sort of white supremacist, Hitler, next fastest dictator thing? It's actually quite funny in hindsight. It's like so hyperbolic, like so dramatic people, Jesus Christ. But there's still a level of doubt, right? Which is understandable when you've been told for 10 years that this guy is a terrible human being. But seeing the way that Democratic leaders are behaving and seeing the way that this admittedly fringe group of people, right? This is not all liberals are behaving this way. This is a fringe group of people. But seeing the way that people are behaving in reaction to, in my opinion, the totally reasonable things that Trump is at least trying to do has only deepened my conviction that at minimum, voting for the Democratic leadership was definitely the wrong move. Like if I had any doubt at least about a vote against that party, I am totally at peace with it now. So am I still like, I'm not cautiously optimistic. I'm warily optimistic. I'm not even wary. I'm paying attention, but I'm also very optimistic. I'm very happy with the things that Trump and Elon have done so far. So there's still a level of like, okay, cool. Like continue to deliver results to the American people. But yeah, the way the Democrats are behaving, it's like, yeah, everything, it's like you're proving everything that people said about you correct. when you're going out on stages and you're essentially you're just being negative about everything and you don't offer any kind of alternative. Like, I don't know what you stand for. I don't know what the alternative is to dealing with government corruption and waste. I don't know what your alternative is for resolving the Russia-Ukraine war. I don't know what your alternative is for Israel resolving Israel-Palestine. It's like, you don't need to let Gaza take over, but what's your plan? These people don't have a plan. So look, I'm hoping that maybe this is just like a temporary rebuilding moment for the Democrats and not just like the core of their DNA. I actually watched the Gavin Newsom, Charlie Kirk conversation, and I was really disappointed because I think Gavin Newsom deserves credit for talking to someone who not only is his opposition but is like maybe the smartest and most competent debater on the Republican MAGA side. He deserves credit for that. But I also didn't hear any real ideological rigor. I didn't hear any actual positions. I just heard him kind of like backpedaling and like, yeah, we messed that up. Yeah, we suck. It almost felt like this, like, not apology tour, but I was just like, dude, like, what are the Democrats exactly? At some point, I was like, hey, if this is the best the Democrats have to offer, the party should just end. Like, the party should go the way of the Whig Party in the 1800s. Just like end and let MAGA absorb the parts that work and then split into two different parties come 2028, because this is completely dysfunctional. So yeah, that's the deeper thing that is really bothering me here, because look, ultimately, I don't want a one-party nation. I mean, I essentially live in a one-party state. California is essentially a one-party state. Ever since Reagan, ironically, gave amnesty to millions of illegal immigrants, it's been blue, with the notable exception of Arnold Schwarzenegger. But it's been blue essentially the whole way. And that hasn't worked out very well. Like, this is a state in decline in a nation that was in decline. But fortunately, we have a president who I believe is correcting that. But I'm not convinced that California will wake up, because guess what? Gavin Newsom has gotten more popular since the LA fires. According to a poll, more popular. Can you believe that? Like, what? How do you have a city burned down and he's more popular? I don't get it. Like, I don't know what proof people need that, yeah, this one party system that we have in California is not working. Having these politicians who just fail from San Francisco, fail in California, want to fail up to the presidency is not working. But yeah, maybe the Tesla's getting torch will work. Like, maybe that'll be the wake up call. I don't know. So anyway, this has been fun to talk with you guys and just like hear your thoughts on it. Appreciate all the viewers for just like sharing your time and your energy with me. Appreciate my Instagram subscribers, my X subscribers, my YouTube members for supporting me and asking questions as well. I am going to upload this whole recording so that people can watch it even if they didn't get to catch it live. So if you thought this was fire, I thought I had some good moments today, if we're being honest. So if you want to share this with friends or family members to hopefully give them a nuanced perspective on what's going on, I encourage you to do that. I'm going to post a full video on YouTube as well as X. So the next stream is going to be Friday at 1 p.m. Pacific. Again, the schedule is going to be Monday, Wednesday, Friday for... Actually, I'm actually going to Japan on vacation. So that's going to be happening in mid-April. But until then, that's going to be the schedule. And then after I come back, I plan on continuing, and maybe we'll even do them more because I'm having a lot of fun doing this. So until Friday, love each other, resolve things civilly. Remember, you are the culture. So even though you see lunatics being hostile toward everyone, don't descend to their level. You're better than that. Stay curious, be skeptical, keep the nuance. Have a great day.